In this video, you're going to see how you can actually record permissions using NAV Easy Security. We both look at how we do a simple recording, how we can use a recording to actually correct an existing permission set. You can also have multiple recordings in the same permission set. We have a way of reducing recorded permissions. When you record, you can really only see if you insert or modify records. If you use indirect permission for certain table, it is an ability to actually reduce those permissions in there. Also at the end, I'll show how we have a minimum access row center that don't read anything of the normal accounting data, and how we would restart the service tier that normally is a requirement for do a proper recording in here. I'm in Easy Security in here. I'm in the Easy Security company. We normally don't have any finance data in here. If I want to record permissions, I want to switch to a company where I actually have accounting data in here. So I'll go ahead and select one of my other companies, like the Kronos North America in here. I now have regular data in here for the application in here. I don't want to click on anything in here because right before I started this, I also restarted the service tier. So I basically have nothing being read from the database right now. I want to start recording permissions. So I'll use SQL Profiler. We have imported a template in here and we made it the default. So when I now do a new trace, I select the database. The Easy Security template is the default in here. I can now go in and do a filter, and my database contain a name like 8-0 in the name, for example. So I go into filter on that one in here. I could also filter on the login name, but that's actually the service account, and I'll talk a little more about that later actually. But in here, it's not the user getting into NAV, it's actually the service account connecting to the database in here. So you typically want to set up a separate service tier for doing the recording in here. I'm alone in this database, so it won't make a difference. So as I click OK and run this trace, I'll see in here it start capturing transaction. Once a second, the service tier will check for new data and new objects in here. So that's what I can see happening in here. But else, it's very quiet in here. So I'll go back. I will go to my list of customers. You can also use a search. It didn't really matter for the recording how you get there. But I'll go to the list of customers. I will open up one of these customers, and I will just made a single change to the address in here. It's important to close the screens because that's when the data is actually being saved in the database out here. So as I did this recording in here, I have tracked all the things that were required for editing a customer in here. I'll go stop my trace and save it as a trace XML file in here, and I'll just call it edit customer. We don't need this one any longer, and I want to switch to a different company in here, my Easy Security company again. As I now go into permission sets, I'll use the menu down here because that's where you normally will find it. I'll create a new one and I will call it edit customer in here. We keep all these recording as a separate entity in here. It means if you add a recording and it's wrong, you can actually later on go remove only that recording. So if you have something that consists of multiple recordings, you can actually easily get rid of the other ones in here. So it's now importing the SQL Profiler trace. It's basically summarizing all the entries, finding tables and objects being used in here, and the level of access in here. So I just want to include this one, and editing a single customer was 45 permissions required in here. And I can go take a look at these ones. Of course, I needed to read and modify my customer. I also needed to read and modify my contact because there was a relationship set up, and I was doing a lot of reading and calculations in other tables in here. These things can actually be modified. We recommend not doing that one. We have another way of actually reducing permissions if necessary in here, but there is no problem editing them in here. Another thing, we captured the objects being used, and if you look at the video about object level security, you see that when we capture the objects being used, it will give people the ability to execute objects we maybe normally take away from most users in the system. But I'm just going to add this recording, and my 45 recorded permission sets is being improved with the source code analyzer in here. So I can see I now got 106 permission sets in here. And all these things marked as additional are actually coming from the source code analyzer. When we install EC Security, we scan the source code in the database, basically knowing all table relation, flow fields, fact boxes, and many other things in here. And all that is being added automatically by the source code analyzer in here when we add the recording in here. It's a very powerful feature because also in the future, if you rescan the source code and you have added new table relations, those ones are actually added automatically in here. Same way as we do it for the individual objects, we actually also do it for the pages. We know what fact boxes are on the pages being used, and we actually add them because other users could have decided to show those fact boxes. If I want to use the same recording in here to actually correct another permission set, I can take the one that came from Microsoft in here, and I can either look up in my recordings and add it in here, or I could simply import it again. I'm just going to add my recording that I already did, and it was a recording down here called Edit Customer, to this permission set coming from Microsoft in here. And as I can see, I have this add related permission functionality in here. As I now have added my recording, if I refresh the screen in here, I'll see that I now also have one recording in here. I can update my permission set, and I can see the 117 that it came with is now 177 in here. And some of these ones are new data access permissions, but other ones, of course, would probably be the object level. So I can see in here that, yeah, I recorded that I needed to read accounting periods. I needed indirect read access for the sales command lines for calculating flow fields, read access to the postcodes, and things like that one. All these things are being added by the recording in here. And of course, are also improving these ones with the object level access that I was needing for this process in here. So that's how you can actually use this one for correcting it in here. When I created my Edit Customer in here, there was things I didn't do in here. I never went and actually added a ship to address and things like that one in here. If I want that feature also, I can do a second recording. But as I mentioned in the beginning, it's very important to have a clean cache when you actually do that one in here. So I'm going to use the admin tool and restart my service tier in here. What it's doing is blanking out the cache, and I can see my session actually closed in here. So I now want to get ready to record again, opening up the client, getting to the right point, but don't click on anything. So as I'm opening up the client, I'm in the wrong company in here. I'm going to switch to my North America. And I'm now ready to do the recording in here. I don't really have to do anything in my profiler, except I just want to start it again in here, because it already have all the settings correct, and even if I restarted the service tier, it's really not depending on how NAV works, it's only what happens between the service tier and the database that it's captured. So I'll go find my customers again. There's one of these small buttons up here if I can get to it here. Ship to addresses. I will create a new one. And I maybe want to add some additional address information down here. I'll just add a single postcode, for example, and things like that one in here. So I could keep on adding more information, but that's actually all I want. Again, remember to close the screen. It's important for it to save the data in the database in here. So I have added now the ability to create a ship to in here. So I will go now stop my trace, save it as a trace XML, and I will just have my edit customer add ship to. Minimize this one, and again go back to my Easy Security company, because that's where I maintain all my data in. Same way as I did before. I want to find my edit customer, and I just want to add a new recording again in here. This time it's add ship to. There was 42 records in here. And same way as before, I can go take a look, and this case I only have read access for the customer, but I will see my ship to down here. I now have both insert and modify down here. So as I now attach my second recording in here, I get more permissions, and I now have 2 recordings. If I go view this one, I will see that my 2 recording has been combined, so I have read and modify in the customer, but I also have read, insert, and modify on my ship to address. So that's how you actually have multiple recordings combining into this one. If my last recording was wrong and I really didn't wanted it, I could of course always go delete this line in here and then redo the recording for the proper permissions in here without doing too many things, for example. Sometimes when you're actually recording, we look at the SQL database so we can see if you need insert, modify, or delete access. But based on the code, it's sometimes possible to actually reduce those permissions. The item table is being modified for the last direct cost every time you post an invoice, a purchase invoice, and we actually don't want the user to have the direct modify, and the code actually allow you to do indirect. You can look at the code to find out how this actually is tied together. But I'm going to show an example how we would actually reduce those permissions in here. So first I want to be ready for recording again. I want to restart my service tier. And as I do that, of course, I get kicked out of NAV. It's always a good sign that you get kicked out, because that means you're restarting the right service tier, of course. I want to get to the company where I have the financial data in. A lot of times you can just have 2 sessions that you're actually recording with, one that stays in Easy Security company and one that is in the North America company, for example. I want to first create my purchase order, so I'm ready to actually post it in here. So I will create a new one, and I would have to restart my service tier again in here because I really want to reset my cache also for this one in here. And I would just have a single item. I'll just going to buy a side panel for the blue location in here. So in this case, I have all the things ready. I have my new purchase order down here. So if I refresh in here, I'm now ready to actually do the posting. So I'm going to again restart my service here, getting the cache clean. This time it starts in the right company, and I won't click any further than just being in the right screen. So I want to start my trace. It blanks out the previous ones, and now I can go to my purchase orders. I can find the new one I created. I prepared the data for this recording. And I want to go in and say my quantity to receive in here is only going to be 5 in here. I'm only going to receive half of it. And then I'm going to post, and I will just receive an invoice in this case. You could of course do only one part of it in here. And I forgot to put in my vendor invoice number in here. So again, I'll receive an invoice. So I got my recording of the posting. So I'm going to stop that, save it as a trace XML file. Switch my company again to the Easy Security. And as I now add my new recording, summarize the permissions. And I can see in this case, for my item table, I actually recorded a modifier. There's no way of knowing if the code actually have the level of access, so you can't in the recording say I only need indirect. We have a way to do that by what we call overriding permissions in here. So I can see when I update this one, I got all the needed permissions in here, but I got this full access for my item in here. And that's where we use the other part of the Easy Security's permissions in here. And I'm just going to create one for the item. I want reads, but I want indirect modify in here. Basically half a permission, expecting the code to deliver the other half. And then there's a check mark out here about overriding the permissions out here. So that means all the recordings I will have, it didn't going to matter what permissions I get to the item table. this line is going to determine it because I actually override the permissions in here. So if I now update my permission set, I can see that my item, I now have the indirect permissions in here. And it's saying it's actually coming from the builder also, not from the recorded permissions any longer. But that's basically how you would reduce permissions to indirects if necessary in here. As I opened up my role center in here, I have the easy security one, and it reads a very minimum of data in here. But we actually also have one that is intended for recording that read even less than this one in here. So if I go to my user personalization, so I have my user, and currently it's using the easy security one, but we have one that is actually called easy security launch in here, and it's even less permissions in here. So if I now go and close NAV and open it again, I'll see that I have a very limited amount of data being read in here. I can go to departments and then start doing my process in here. The role center, especially order processor, some of the more advanced ones, can read a lot of data, and you don't really want that to happen if you want a 100% correct recording. So using one of the role centers we provide, preferably this launch one that really have a minimum permissions in here, you can actually reduce that initial reading in there.